So I think maybe I'll call this one Lent, Suffering, and Triumph. As a New York City firefighter, um, you're battling horrific fires sometimes, and I think the public generally acknowledges that, this is, there's suffering involved with actually succeeding in putting out a fire. You look at firemen, the heavy gear, the amount of tools, the things that they have to do, the exhaustion and the hard work and the dangers, and yet the firemen do it because of a sense of duty, right? And so they suffer with an end game, a purpose to achieve a putting out of the fire, ending of the danger, right? So we're in Lent, and today's readings at Mass were about suffering. They were about sacrifice, almsgiving, some of the things that we do traditionally during Lent to prepare, and they're all suffering related, right? So fasting. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the purpose of suffering, because you have people that will, they'll use the idea of suffering, because when we see horrific suffering, we say, how can God allow that? And it's common. I've heard many, many people tell me the same thing, and I think that it is a tendency when any of us goes through something that's horrific. You can have all kinds of words, but then, you're asking the same question: how does God allow this? How do you see this and let it happen? However, one of the things that I thought was one of the most interesting things, an organism that has all obstacles removed from it, this is a science, a biological fact, if you remove all obstacles from it, it withers and dies. So, in a sense, the obstacles can have a purpose, and the obstacles present suffering, right? You have to suffer to get around the obstacle, to get over the obstacle, get through it. So I'm going to first, this is in my book, America the Exceptional. I'm going to read to you a quote from Chuck Norris, 6-time world champion in Taekwondo, and everybody's seen him in movies and the countless jokes that are made that, Chuck Norris can do just about anything. He says, as a young man, I discovered the power of doing hard things. Abject poverty, the father's alcoholism, and desertion of our family, and my own shyness were a few of the obstacles I faced and overcame growing up. My mother always told me, God has a plan for your life, and she's right. Each of us is called to reach for greatness. There really is a hero in all of us. We've all been designed by God to be a blessing to many and a hero to some. I like that quote because it's inspiring. A lot of us can look and say, hey, you know what? The things that I'm putting up with have no purpose. But the purpose is really outside in front of our neighbors, our fellow human beings. So you look ahead to this Lent, and what we're trying to do is we're trying to prepare ourselves for the triumph of Christ on the cross. And what is the triumph? The triumph is that he performed that suffering for all of us, and in the end, he rose from the dead. And so he overcame death, and that is really the hope for our own future. So the Pope John Paul II is really the Pope that, I lived with my whole life up until recent memory. And so he said, could God have justified himself before human history, so full of suffering, without placing Christ's cross at the center of that history? Then he goes on, he says, the crucified Christ is proof of God's solidarity with man in his suffering. So, simplified, you can say, hey, the person asked the question, how can God allow that kind of suffering in the world? And then, then the second question you have to ask is, God allowed his own son to suffer. And it was a gruesome suffering. So we don't do that alone. And so the question is what's the purpose? And if in fact every obstacle that you overcome makes you stronger, then right away there is a benefit. And when suffering becomes so overwhelming, then it's time for people to take on lighter sufferings in the helping of those that are suffering. Great things. That's kind of like where I began with the fire department and firemen putting out fires and saving lives is the same thing, right? The horror of the people in the fire is one side of suffering, and the other side is those that put themselves in harm's way to alleviate them of that danger. So we need to be forward thinking and realize that we have a victory that we're looking for, a triumph that we're looking forward to, and that's Easter, and that's what the preparation is in Lent. So I hope that these words somehow give you a little bit of an introspection. And there's certainly other thoughts on suffering in Lent, but I thought I'd bring these out, and I wish you all a wonderful Easter season. God bless you.